think it's great that people nowadays realize that the supplement industry is pretty much 95% horse crap. It is an industry that has its roots in misinformation, overhyping products, delivering unachievable promises, and generally coaxing people into buying stuff they don't even need. But as you may have guessed, not all supplements are useless. A lot of them are, but there's still a few needles in the haystack. So let's take a look at my personal top 5 supplements that are actually worth your money. But first of all, let's clarify a few things. A huge factor that plays a role in the efficacy of supplements is context. For example, I would say that a big majority of people that live in developed countries wouldn't really benefit from taking a multivitamin. But for specific instances, for example, when a person's nutrition is so poor that it lacks basic nutrients like B complex vitamins, zinc, phosphorus, and others, then yes, a multivitamin might actually be very beneficial. Obviously, if you have a deficiency, then supplementing to fix that specific deficiency is always beneficial. This goes without saying. However, in this video, we're looking at supplements that can benefit a big portion of the population without the need for these hyper-specific circumstances. So just keep in mind that I won't be mentioning specific nutrients with the sole justification being, well, if you're deficient in that, then you should supplement to fix it. So minor spoiler, you're not gonna see your irons, your B12s, or your calciums in this list. If you're deficient in those, then absolutely you would benefit from supplementing. Also, while I would have loved to put these supplements in a ranking list, because I think ranking is inherently fun and interesting, it's not really possible, since again, different supplements work well for different situations. So yes, unfortunately, this is not a ranking list and these supplements are in no particular order. Anyway, let's kick it off with number 1, which is protein powder. Now, some people get really fixated on what type of powder is the best. Is it whey because it's fast absorbing and thus is optimal post-workout? Is it casein because it's slow absorbing and thus it's better to consume during the nighttime to get a stable influx of amino acid? Which plant protein is the most complete? Look, all of these factors are relatively unimportant compared to the amount of protein that you're getting each day. Don't stress the details so much, just buy the one that you like or can afford. Now, protein powder is so great because it's extremely versatile. In fact, you can think of protein powder like a specific type of food instead of as a supplement. And there's a certain stigma that people tend to think that they shouldn't even be looking at protein powder unless they're training with weights or some other form of resistance. Now, of course, it is true that people who partake in resistance training are usually the ones with the highest protein needs and by extension would benefit the most from supplementing with protein powder, but that doesn't mean that nobody else is allowed to consume it. Again, it's extremely versatile. Don't have time for a full meal? Make a protein shake instead. Want to add some protein to your breakfast to make it more filling and sustaining? Add protein to your oats. Now, many people are rightfully turned off by the relatively high price of protein powders. But when talking about cost effectiveness, that is, how much protein you're getting per dollar that you're spending, protein powder is actually one of the cheapest sources out there. So for example, let's say that you're a person that works out and you want to hit your daily protein needs, which is usually about 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. Again, for a person that partakes in resistance training. Well, getting some of that protein from a supplement can actually save you a few bucks in the long term. Now, I am of course not saying that you should live off protein powder. Of course, you should be primarily focused on eating whole foods, and you can absolutely get all the protein that you need from whole foods, even if you have increased demands. But for all the benefits that protein powder provides, it's safe, it's easy, it's convenient, and it's relatively cheap compared to other protein sources. I have to include it on this list. Number 2 is vitamin D. Now, I'm kind of going against what I said earlier, how I wouldn't include vitamins or minerals just because a lot of people are deficient in them. But vitamin D is a little bit of a special case. What differentiates vitamin D deficiency from other common deficiencies like B12, iron, or calcium is why it happens, and more importantly, how you can fix it. You see, while diet has some impact on vitamin D levels, the impact is fairly minimal. Now, putting aside some chronic conditions like kidney or liver failure, the most common reason for vitamin D deficiency is a lack of exposure to sunlight or a lack of synthesizing vitamin D even with exposure. So people who work indoors, which let's face it, is pretty much most of us, people with darker skins that have higher melanin levels and thus reducing the effect that sunlight has on synthesizing vitamin D, people who live in countries which have relatively little sunlight, all of them are at risk of developing vitamin D deficiency. And most of these factors you can't even fix. You can't change your skin color, you can't change the weather, you can't change your country's geographical location so that the sun will be at a better angle for you to absorb the sunlight. And hell, even the one that you can fix, getting more exposure to sunlight, isn't always that practical. For example, I live in Cyprus, which is a very sunny island. But I don't wake up every day spending 30 minutes without a shirt, in shorts, outside at peak hours so that I can absorb a good amount of sunlight to synthesize vitamin D. I mean, if you have the time and will to do that, more power to you. But it's just not that practical for many people. Most of us spend 95% of our time indoors. And again, you can't really cover the gap of not synthesizing vitamin D through diet alone. It has a relatively small effect. Even a diet that is made specifically to be high in vitamin D, containing a lot of eggs, fish, liver, and fortified foods, is not going to have that much of an impact. So what am I getting at? Supplementation. I think pretty much everyone can benefit from supplementing with vitamin D just enough to prevent deficiencies. Now, people worry about the risk of toxicity with vitamin D, and yes, there is a very real risk if you take it too far. The upper tolerable limit of vitamin D per day for adults is 4,000 international units, or about 200 micrograms of vitamin D. Now, the upper tolerable limit is considered to be the highest amount of a substance that you can get per day without causing any sort of problems in your health in the long run. Now, the RDA, or recommended dietary allowance for vitamin D per day, is 600 international units, or about 15 micrograms of vitamin D, or 800 international units, or about 20 micrograms for people over 70 and for people with a higher risk of osteoporosis. This means that most people can safely supplement with something like 1,000 to 2,000 international units of vitamin D each day without ever getting close to that upper tolerable limit, but still being way above the RDA. Even if you're getting vitamin D from other sources like sunlight and diet, it's still not nearly enough to get you towards that upper limit. Now, if you have a deficiency in vitamin D, then you can certainly increase the dose for a period of time just to rebound more quickly and then decrease it to a more moderate amount. Okay, so moving on. Number 3 is probiotics. Probiotics are healthy microorganisms that live in our bodies, primarily the large intestine, and can be beneficial for our health in a lot of ways. Probiotics are a hot topic right now. There's new studies all the time that show that they can potentially prevent chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and can even maybe fight against depression. And of course, the most studied and well-known effects of probiotics are on the intestines themselves. They are already used therapeutically in some conditions like IBS or irritable bowel syndrome, with positive to mixed results. Now, I'm including probiotics on this list for 2 major reasons. Number 1, they appear to be able to benefit health in a lot of ways. And number 2, it's relatively difficult to get them if you don't like the specific foods that contain them. Probiotics exist pretty much solely on fermented foods like yogurt, pickles, kefir, and others. Now, while they may be fairly easy to consume if you like those foods, most of these foods are not really that common in Western cultures, except for yogurt. And I guess pickles, but come on, how many pickles are you eating per day? Now, for people that don't consume these types of foods daily, for example me, taking a probiotic can be fairly beneficial. Now, a major downside of probiotic supplements is the cost. Obviously, this depends on the brand that you're taking, but taking probiotics every day can cost you well above $30 per month, which is pretty steep. Now, if you can afford that, more power to you. But if you don't really want to spend that much and you don't like foods that are naturally high in probiotics like yogurt, then what you can do is just use them more sparingly. So instead of taking a probiotic supplement every day, you could take one every 2 to 3 days. It should still be enough to see many benefits while keeping the cost much lower. Now, if you're wondering whether or not you should be combining probiotics with prebiotics, which is basically the food that the probiotics consume, well, the answer is not necessarily. And the reason is because prebiotics are mostly fermentable fibers, and they can be naturally found in a lot of common foods like fruits, veggies, legumes, and whole grains. So if you are including a lot of these foods in your diet, which you should be, then you don't really have to worry about supplementing with prebiotics. Number 4 is creatine. Now, I'm chaining on this one a little bit because creatine is pretty much exclusive to people that work out, specifically that have intense bursts of energy in their training. So we're pretty much talking about strength training, sprinting, throwing, and all of those sports that have intense bursts of energy. However, I have to include it because it's just so damn effective in that area. And also because hitting the gym has become extremely popular these days. It's more popular now than ever. So a lot more people can actually benefit from creatine than in the past. Creatine works by increasing the amount of ATP in our bodies, which is the primary energy source that is used when having short bursts of energy, like for example, lifting a heavy single. And despite what many people think, creatine's effect is actually over the long term. It's not a drink it now, get stronger immediately type of supplement. In fact, no supplement is like that. Creatine might allow you to hit an extra rep or two in the gym, so over the course of dozens or hundreds of workouts, those extra reps will add up and give you more results. Now, we do get creatine naturally from sources like beef and seafood, but it's in much smaller amounts. The body can also internally synthesize about a gram of creatine per day. However, the supplement dose is much higher. A serving of creatine is usually about 5 grams. Creatine has had the honor of being the most widely studied and proven supplement ever back in the day. I'm not sure if this title still holds up now, but it's certainly one of the most well-studied and proven supplements ever. It's also really cheap. You can get 60 servings of creatine for about 20 to 25 bucks. In my opinion, anyone who partakes in a sport that can benefit from creatine should be taking it. Oh, and don't worry about loading. Again, creatine's effect is long-term. You're really not gonna see any major benefit from loading. You're just gonna saturate your muscles a little bit faster. Also, there are a few studies that show that creatine can actually help brain function in elderly people. However, there's still more research to be done in this area. And finally, at number 5, we have omega-3 fatty acids. Now lately, these have taken a back seat and have given their place to their newer, hotter cousins to take the spotlight. Still, omega-3s are extremely beneficial and valuable. Omega-3 fatty acids are polyunsaturated fatty acids that are found mostly in fish and are extremely beneficial. They are considered an essential nutrient, meaning that your body needs them in order to thrive and function properly. Omega-3 fatty acids are one of the most well-known and potent natural anti-inflammatory nutrients out there. So much that they're actually used in therapy of a lot of chronic inflammatory diseases like arthritis. They are crucial in brain function. They can help lower blood pressure and triglycerides, and by extension help prevent cardiovascular disease and lower the risk of stroke. They are fantastic is what I'm saying. But what lands them on this list is how specific you need to eat in order to get them. Omega-3 fatty acids are found pretty much exclusively on fatty fish. The American Heart Association recommends eating at least 2 servings of about 3 to 4 ounces of fatty fish per week in order to get a decent amount of omega-3s. Now, examples include salmon, sardines, mackerel, herring, and many others. Now, because I know that someone will immediately jump from their seat and say, well, you can get omega-3 fatty acids from plant sources as well. Plant sources of omega-3 fatty acids contain mostly ALA, or alpha-lipoic acid. In contrast, fatty fish contain mostly EPA and DHA. All 3 of these are types of omega-3 fatty acids. However, only EPA and DHA can be used directly by the body. ALA needs to be converted. And the problem is that this conversion process is very inefficient. It's estimated that only about 15% of the ALA consumed will be converted to DHA or EPA. So while yes, some plant products like walnuts and flax seeds may be very high in ALA, the actual amount of usable omega-3 fatty acids that you're getting from them is much lower, and it's usually not enough to cover your needs. So the bottom line is, if you're not actively consuming at least 2 fairly large servings of fatty fish per week, you should definitely consider supplementing with fish oil. Omega-3 supplements are actually very cheap, costing only about 10 to 15 bucks per month if you're consuming about 1,000 milligrams of omega-3 per day, which is a decent amount. In fact, it's actually much cheaper than buying the actual fish. Although, having said that, fish is an actual food, meaning it provides energy, macronutrients, and important micronutrients like vitamin B12, vitamin D, and many others. So definitely consider including fatty fish in your diet if you're not already, but if you can't or if that's not an option for you, then definitely consider supplementing with omega-3 fatty acids. So these were my personal top 5 supplements that I recommend spending your money on. Now, does this mean that no other supplements are worth your money? No, it doesn't. These are just the ones that I think most people would benefit from. Now, does this also mean that you have to stop what you're doing right now and go buy these immediately? No. You should do your own research, use your own critical thinking, and ideally talk to a professional about your own specific needs and circumstances and decide whether or not these supplements are right for you. And make sure you do your due diligence if you're suffering from any form of disease or if you're taking any sort of medication, because a lot of supplements can interact with a lot of drugs. So what are your personal best supplements? Please let me know in the comments down below. If you like the video, then I would really appreciate a like. If you're interested in getting no BS, straight up factual nutrition knowledge, then consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.